Hello students. So this is Mohini Miss from Teresa school, and so in the earlier videos I had taught the first chapter. So now I will be starting not the second but the third chapter, nature of colonial dominance. So here, what does colonial mean? Colonial means the British rule. They are known as the colonial rulers because they tried to colonize India. They tried to make India as the colony. They tried to bring India under their control. So that is why they are known as the colonial power. And dominance means to control. So the chapter is about the rule. What type of rule did the British establish in India? So I will be now I will start the chapter. So in the year 1600, Queen Elizabeth I, she gave the charter, or she gave the monopoly rights. Monopoly rights are privilege to the East India Company to trade in India. So the East India Company now established the East India Company. Actually, it is a trading body. It is a trading body, and so the East India Company now, they established trade centers in one trade center was established in Surat in 1613, and they also established a factory in 1619 in Surat, and then they established another factory in Sultanati in 1690, and in the year 1686, Job Charnock discovered Calcutta in the village around Sultanati. Then, now when the Mughal Emperor was Aurangzeb, at that time Aurangzeb appointed Murshid Quli Khan as the Diwan of Bengal. Diwan means a person who collects the tax. So he was in charge of collecting tax of Bengal. And in 1717, Murshid Quli Khan became the Nawab of Bengal. Nawab means the king of Bengal in 1717, and then he became independent ruler of Bengal. Then in the same year, in 1717, Farrukh Shir was now the Mughal Emperor. So Farrukh Shir gave a firman, he issued a firman. Firman is also known as dastak. It is a license or a permit to trade in India. So Farrukh Shir issued a firman, and according to this firman, now the East India Company could do tax-free trade in India. Tax-free trade means, without paying tax, they could do the trade in India in return for 3,000 rupees a year. And so this firman was known as the Farrukh Shir Firman of 1717. So now this firman gave the right to the East India Company only to trade, to do tax-free trade, but not the company officials, not the company officers. But the company officers were misusing that firman because they were carrying on duty-free trade or tax-free trade without paying any tax while they were carrying out their private trade also. So there was an abuse of the dastak, and this led to the loss of treasury in Bengal. So since there was a loss of treasury in Bengal at that time, during the time of Murshid Quli Khan and also during the time of Alivardi Khan, they protested, but they did not come in conflict with the British. It was during the time of the successor of Alivardi Khan, Siraj-ud-Dawla. That time he came in conflict with the British. As a result, the historic Battle of Plassey started on 23rd of June 1757. And so this Siraj-ud-Dawla, he was made the Nawab in 1756, and now I am going to deal about the circumstances leading to the Battle of Plassey. So, what are the circumstances? What are the causes that led to the Battle of Plassey? So, the first reason for the Battle of Plassey was that when Siraj-ud-Dawla became the Nawab, everyone sent him gifts, congratulatory message, telling him congratulations on becoming the Nawab, but the English did not send him any gift. Then, his own uncle, Shaukat Jung, and his auntie, Ghashiti Begum, they were not happy when he became the Nawab. And another is that the British and the French, they were building forts. That means they were preparing for war. So, when they were building forts, at that time, Siraj-ud-Dawla told both the English and the French not to build forts. The French listened, but the English did not listen. So, this led to estrangement of relation or bad relation, uncordial relation between the two. Then, there was one treasurer in Siraj-ud-Dawla's court. His name was Krishna Das. So, Krishna Das had fled with huge amount of money to Calcutta. And Siraj knew that he will take shelter with the British. So, he told British not to give shelter to Krishna Das, but the British did not listen. And so, Siraj-ud-Dawla was very, very angry. So, what did he do? He himself went to Calcutta, and without any difficulty, he captured Calcutta. And it is said that many people, English people, were very afraid of Siraj-ud-Dawla. So, they fled to a place called Fulta. And it is said that there they were kept in one room, and out of 146 people, the next day 123 people were suffocated to death, and this incident is known as the Black Hole Tragedy. Then after that is another point regarding the Battle of Plassey is that now the English were very angry with Siraj-ud-Dawla. So, the English reoccupied Calcutta by forcing Siraj-ud-Dawla to sign the Treaty of Alinagar in February 1757. So, the British succeeded in reoccupying Calcutta. Then, there were some officers in the court of Siraj-ud-Dawla who did not like him. For instance, Jagat Seth, Umichand, Rai Durlab, and also his commander of the army, the head of the army, Mir Zafar, also did not like him. They were all conspiring and making plans to remove him from the Nawabship. So, at that time, all these people, they conspired, they joined hand with the British, with Clive, and they attacked Siraj-ud-Dawla at night. At night, Siraj-ud-Dawla was attacked. So, because of Siraj-ud-Dawla was all alone, so that is why Siraj-ud-Dawla was defeated, and this is how the historic Battle of Plassey took place. So, these are the circumstances leading to the Battle of Plassey. So, then after the Battle of Plassey, now Mir Zafar was made the ruler or the Nawab of Bengal, and Mir Zafar also could not satisfy the British, because Mir Zafar kept on and on demanding for more, the British kept on and on demanding for more and more money. So, Mir Zafar could not satisfy the British. As a result, he now joined hands with the Dutch, and with the help of the Dutch, he attacked the English, and the Battle of Badera was fought in 1759. The Dutch as well as Mir Zafar were defeated, and not only Mir Zafar was defeated, but he was removed from the Nawabship, and now Mir Qasim came to the throne. And Mir Qasim was a person who wanted to be independent. He didn't want to remain under the control of the British. So, it was because of that the Battle of the Battle of Buxar now took place during the Nawabship of Mir Qasim. So, now the circumstances leading to the causes leading to the Battle of Buxar are: number one, Mir Qasim He shifted his capital from Murshidabad to Mongir. And the British thought that he wanted to be away from the British, so they were quite angry with him. And another reason was he tried to modernize the army, and this was not liked by the British. And also the main reason for the Battle of Buxar was because the British officials were misusing the dasta, so it was not fair for the Indian traders, because the Indian traders were paying the tax, whereas the British officials were not paying the tax. So the Indians were in a disadvantage. So since the Indians were in a disadvantage, so he wanted to have a compromise with the British officers. So Mir Qasim also invited the British to have a settlement, but the British did not take any heed, they did not pay attention. As a result, Mir Qasim now removed the tax from everyone. That means no one was going to pay the tax, not the British, neither the Indians had to pay the tax. And so this put the Indians and the British on equal footing, and this was not liked by the British. So all these led to the estrangement of relation between Mir Qasim and the British. So Mir Qasim now joined hands with other rulers like Sujau-ud-Daula, the Nawab of Oudh, and Shah Alam, the Mughal Emperor. The three combined forces now joined together, and then they attacked the British, and this is how the Battle of Buxar was fought, and at the end the British naturally succeeded, and Mir Qasim and the combined forces were defeated. So this is what you have to write for the circumstances leading to the Battle of Plassey and the Battle of Buxar. Then next question is about compare the consequences of the Battle of Plassey with the Battle of Buxar. So for this, the answer, now I am going to tell you the answer. And here is that the Battle of Plassey was only a small fight, it was known as skirmish, whereas the Battle of Buxar was a war. Number one. Number two is that the Siraj fought all alone, whereas in the Battle of Plassey, whereas in the Battle of Buxar, the combined forces, combined forces, the armies of the three rulers, they fought. And next is, in the Battle of Plassey, the British almost became the master of Bengal, whereas after the Battle of Buxar, they became the master of Bengal. The whole of Bengal totally came under the control of the British. Then another thing is that in both the battles, now it showed the superiority of the British army and the inferiority of the Indian army, and in both the battles, it showed the Nawabs were like the puppet, and the independent Nawabship came to an end after the Battle of Buxar. And in both the wars, the British were successful. And very important point is that after the Battle of Plassey, the British they took away all the wealth of Bengal from Plassey. That is why it is known as the Plassey plunder. And that money that they got, they used in trade, in doing business, in fighting wars, and most of the wars they won. And about the Battle of Buxar is that they got the Diwani that made the British the legal ruler, the legal power in Bengal. They got the Diwani of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa, and that made the British the legal power. That means now the law protected they got the protection from the law. The British got the protection from the law. So this is what you have to write for the consequences of the Battle of Plassey and the Battle of Buxar. Then, now after the Battle of Buxar was fought, then the British signed a treaty, first treaty of Allahabad with Sujau-ud-Daula, and from Sujau-ud-Daula they got Allahabad and Kara. And then they signed the second battle of they signed the second treaty of Allahabad with Shah Alam II, and from Shah Alam II, they gave Kara and Allahabad to Shah Alam II, and Shah Alam in return gave the grant of Diwani of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa in return for 26 lakhs of rupees. So, you know, they got this Diwani, and so, you know, there is a question, what is Diwani or the grant of Diwani? So here, you know, the British, you know, they got the Diwani of the right of collecting tax of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa in 1765. Okay, and they also got the civil justice. That means they were not only got the right to collect the tax, but they were also protected from all type of harm and injury that could be done to them. So they got this right, so that is why this grant of Diwani is important. Then, now after getting the grant of Diwani in 1765 from Shah Alam II. Now, you know, Clive knew that the British were inexperienced. He knew that the British did not know the method in order to take the responsibility of administration in India, and he also wanted to hide the enormous power that the British were enjoying in Bengal. So Clive started a peculiar system of government which came to be known as the dual government. It was known as the dual government, or it is known as the double government or diarchy. It all means two set of government. So a peculiar system was started by Robert Clive. So now what is dual government or diarchy? So the dual government is that, now, you know, there were two sets of government. One set of government was the Diwani, and Diwani means collection of tax. And another set of government was the Nizamat, and Nizamat means to administer, to rule over Bengal. So there were two sets of government, and what British did, Clive was very clever. So what did Clive do is that now Diwani, the right of collecting tax from Bengal, Bihar and Orissa, he gave it to the British, and the right of administrating or ruling over Bengal was given to the Nawab. So here, Nawab had all the responsibility, but he had no power, and the British had all the power but no responsibility. So, you know, this system of government was known as the dual government or diarchy. And both these questions come for 2 marks. This first two questions come for 8 marks, and these 2 questions come for 2 marks. So this is how, you know, the British slowly started their colonial power in India, and slowly they became powerful in India. So this is all about the Battle of Plassey and the Battle of Buxar. Then the next is about the Regulating Act of 1773, the Pitt's India Act of 1784, the Charter Act of 1813, the Charter Act of 1833, and the Act of 1858. Now we are going to deal with these different administrative acts. So now, as the inefficiency and corruption of the East India Company came to be known to the British Parliament, then the British Parliament now, you know, they started to pass administrative acts, these acts in order to control the East India Company. So the first act that was passed was the Regulating Act of 1773, and now this act was passed, and there are some provisions of this Regulating Act of 1773. There are 4 provisions of the Regulating Act. The first provision is that there was a body called the Board of Control, and these Board of Control, they were like the executive officers whose duty was to, you know, carry out the policies made by the British government. So this Board of Control, they had to lay before the British Parliament all the correspondence related with civil, economic and military affairs. That is point number 1. Then point number 2 is that now, according to this act, now the Governor of Bengal became the Governor General of Bengal. The Governor of Bengal became the Governor General of Bengal, and Warren Hastings was the first Governor General of Bengal. Then, now the Governor General and the Council, he had some ministers, you know, the Council of Ministers, and their duty of the governor and the council of ministers was to look into the affairs of Bombay, Madras, and during the time of war and during the time of peace. And the last important point is that at that time the Supreme Court was established. Supreme Court was established in 1774, and Sir Eliza Impey was the first Chief Justice at the time. So these all are the provisions of the Regulating Act of 1773, but this Regulating Act of 1773 had some shortcomings, had some demerits, and the first demerit is that the Council of Ministers, they did not have any harmony among themselves. Next is that the Supreme Court was formed, but they did not know about their power. Their power was not specified, and also which law was to be followed. The Indian law or the British law was to be followed, it was not specified. So there was a lot of confusion regarding the, regarding the law. So this is about the Regulating Act of 1773. Then after that, the Pitt's India Act of 1784 was passed, and it was passed during the time of William Pitt the Younger, who was the Prime Minister of England at that time, and it was passed during his time. And this Pitt's Act was actually an improvement on the Regulating Act of 1773. Now the provisions of this Pitt's India Act is that the East India Company now came under the control of the British Parliament through the Board of Control. And this Board of Control were also the executive members, and Board of Control, they were the executive members I told you, no? So they controlled, through them the British Parliament controlled the East India Company, and another was that the East India Company was also controlled by the Court of Directors. And this Court of Directors, they were in India, and they were also the executive body whose duty was also to carry on the policies made by the British government. So so they control the Board of Directors control the East India Company. And another is that now the Viceroy was not the real, but he became the virtual ruler under the supervision of the British Parliament. So these are the three provisions of the Pitt's India Act. Then the defects of the Pitt's India Act is that, number one is that now the Governor General came under the control of the dual control. He was controlled by two sets of officers, the Board of Control and the Board of Directors. Then the Governor General now, although he was controlled by two sets of officers, but he had a free hand in administration. He could do whatever, because he could play one master against the other, and he could act on his own discretion. He could act on his own according to his own wish. And the last important thing is that. Now the British, the new phase started after this act in the British policy of territorial expansion. So these all are about the Pitt's India Act of 1784. Then another act was passed. It was passed in 1813, and this act now brought an end to the right to trade of the East India Company. Now the East India Company could not trade. That right was taken away by the Act of 1813. And in the same year, the British also gave 1 lakh of rupees for education, promotion of education in India. And in 1833, the Governor General of Bengal, his power was increased, and he came to be known as the Governor General of India. And Lord William Bentinck was the first Governor General of India. And beside that, one more member was added in the Viceroy's Council, and he was the lawyer, and that lawyer was no other than Thomas Babington Macaulay, who was a lawyer and who also gave importance to the spread of Western education in India. So these are the different acts, and one more act is there, and that is the Act of 1858. It was passed after the revolt of 1857, and it was passed on 2nd of August 1858. And according to this act now, the Governor General was known as the Viceroy. So Lord Canning was the first Viceroy of India. And Lord Canning now, what he did is that he called a Delhi, he called first the Allahabad Darbar, the meeting in Allahabad, and he announced the Queen's Proclamation. On 1st of November 1858, the Queen's Proclamation was announced by Viceroy Lord Canning. And there are some provisions of this Queen's Proclamation. The first provision is that they said they will not follow, they will abolish the doctrine of lapse. Next, they will not follow the policy of territorial expansion. They will give equality to all the Indians. They will, remove that distinction regarding religion, and they said that they will give jobs to all the Indians, and the rights and treaties of different companies would be, different people would be respected. So all these were the provisions of the Queen's Proclamation. But this Queen's Proclamation is regarded as a political bluff. It is regarded as a false promise because these promises were not fulfilled. And then in 1877, Queen Victoria, she called the Delhi Darbar. The Delhi Darbar was called, and she declared herself as the Empress of India. So these all are the acts, administrative acts that was passed during that time. Then so after that I will deal with another, after the acts now I will deal with another very important question. Okay, that is important for you, and that is write about the development of civil service, the police and the army under the British, and this also comes for 8 marks. So now I will deal with the civil service. So the body of high government officials whose duty was to administer India were known as the civil service, civil servants, or they were known as the civilians. And they were the first important pillar of the British government, and their duty or their responsibility was to carry out the laws passed by the or framed by the British government. And initially at the beginning these civil servants were mostly, they were appointed by the Court of Directors. But later on it was felt that efficient person knowing Indian languages must be chosen as the civil servant. So it was at this time that Lord Wellesley he built the Fort William College in 1800 in order to give education to the British civilians in Indian language and culture. Then is that another thing is that the board of directors also appointed the sons of upper class people as the civil servants. But now the Act of 1833, it specified that the post was to be filled only by people who passed the competitive examination to be held in England every year. And examination was also conducted according to the Act of 1853, which specified about the way in which the examination was to be conducted. And the age group for the age to sit for this exam was from 18 to 23. Anyone above the age of 18 to 23 could sit for the examination, and the examination was conducted by the Commission, Civil Service Commission. And so this is how the civil servants were chosen on the basis of merit. So there were many Indians who qualified for this examination. One example was Satyendranath Tagore. He was the person who was chosen, who qualified for this civil servant examination. And it is believed that even Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, he qualified for this examination, but he did not want to become the civil servant, because he will have, if he become the civil servant, then he will have to work in favor of the British. So that is why he did not join the civil servant. Another thing that I have to deal with is the police. So, the police were the third important pillar of the British administration, and it is said that police system started in India even before it started in England, and it was introduced by Lord Cornwallis. And now, since police system started, so the zamindars were now relieved of their duty of maintaining law and order. And Lord Cornwallis, he made a set of rules which dealt with the different departments of administration, and that set of rules was known as the Cornwallis Code, and it was introduced on 1st May 1783, and this Cornwallis Code, it gave importance to some points, like for instance, it specified some important points, and that is, number one is that now the zamindars were relieved of their duty of maintaining law and order. The next is that the districts were divided into thanas, and in each thana there were 20 policemen, who looked after the law and order problem. And it is said that in 1808 the superintendent of police was appointed, and he had to take the information from lower officers, and his duty was to maintain law and order. His duty was to maintain law and order. So this is about the police. Then the last thing about the army is that in the 18th century, the British had to hire the army from England. And so in course of time, it was felt that it was quite difficult, and it was also not adequate. So at that time, what they did is that they now wanted to revise the military policy. They wanted to, so the need for building a regular army on permanent basis was felt. So now it was the French who first recruited the Indians, who first admitted the Indians in the army, and this was followed by the British. So now British started to appoint the Indians in the army. Before, Indians were not appointed in the army, but now the Indians were appointed in the army. And when Major Stringer Lawrence came to India in 1747, it is said that he recruited and he organized the Indians on a European model, and this was followed by Robert Clive. And so the Indians were chosen as the military personnel. So the Indian army personnel were known as the sepoys, from the word sipai, meaning soldier. And just before the Battle of Plassey, Lord Clive, what he did is that he raised a regiment of 400 sepoys, and they were known as the Bengal Native Regiment. And for some time, they were also known as the Lal Paltan. And this army had a lot of grievances. They had a lot of complaints, grievances. And the grievances were, number one is that the army, the Indian army, they were never given high post. The highest post that the Indian got was that of a subedar. Even at the age of 55, the highest post was that of a subedar. That an Indian held, the highest post that the Indian held was that of a subedar. And mostly they recruited the foreigners in the army, and the Indians got bad food. The Indian soldiers got bad food, low salary, they were not treated well, there was religious difference. But in spite of all these differences, it was the army that helped the British to establish the British Indian Empire in India. And so this is all about the development of civil service, police and the army. I told you it is important. And the last is about deindustrialization. So what is deindustrialization? This also comes for 2 marks. So deindustrialization, it is just the opposite of industrialization. Industrialization means you know, when there is growth of industries, when there is development of industries, it is known as industrialization. And deindustrialization is just the opposite. It means decline of industries. So you have to do only this bit, because the other half, other half of this question came. For 8 marks it came. So only for, you should remember what is deindustrialization, and it comes for 2 marks. So these are the important questions that come from this chapter. The circumstances leading to the Battle of Plassey and the Battle of Buxar, or the causes leading to the Battle of Plassey and the Battle of Buxar. Another is the consequences of the Battle of Plassey with the Battle of Buxar. What is grant of Diwani? What is double government? Then the Regulating Act and the development of civil service, police and the army, and what is deindustrialization. So this is all. I will now stop here, and I will continue about the remaining portion in the next class. Thank you so much.